Hello and welcome to our pharmaphorum webinar, today in association with P360. My name is Catherine Longworth and I'm the web editor at pharmaphorum. And today we have a great panel of speakers who will be exploring the digital transformation of the pharma-to-physician relationship as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, although the exact shape of healthcare's new normal is still being framed, there are already some clear trends taking place, most notably around how pharmaceutical companies are communicating, visiting, and engaging with physicians. Today, we'll hear both the pharma and physician perspective on how COVID-19 is changing engagement strategies, and we'll also be looking to the future to discuss how the pharma-physician relationship may evolve over the next few years. Now, in a moment, I'll introduce our panel. But before we do that, just a few housekeeping points. Firstly, please send questions. We want to hear from you throughout today's discussion, and there will be an opportunity for us to discuss them all at the end of the discussion. And you can send them in via the question box on your screen. And as I said before, we welcome as many as possible. We'll definitely try and get through them. Also, I would like to remind you that all throughout the session, there will be an accompanying Twitter stream for the webinar over on our pharmaphorum Twitter account. Hashtag is #PPWebinar. So please do follow along there and get involved in the conversation. And finally, just to mention that this webinar will be recorded and an archived version will be available shortly after today's live stream. So you can listen back or share with any colleagues. So please enjoy. And now I'll introduce our panel. So joining me, we have Anupam Nandwana, CEO and founder of specialist pharma software company P360. We also have Florent Edouard, Senior Vice President at Grunenthal Group and Global Head of Commercial Excellence. And finally, Dr. Mandira Mehra, double board certified physician, a medical journalist, and television medical correspondent. Welcome all. I'll now switch over onto video and we can see the panel. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
And yeah, so it'd be great to maybe before we get into our first panel discussion, just hear a bit more about your background. Maybe we could start with you, Anupam.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I know we have a global audience, so very excited to be on this panel today. I'm the CEO and founder of P360. We are a 100% life sciences commercial business support solutions company. Been personally in commercial pharma for pretty much entire my professional life. One of the key things we do is how do we make HCP and patient engagement with the pharma companies more meaningful and support with the technologies. So very, very excited and looking forward to this great conversation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Anupam. And Florent.
Hello, nice to be with you. So I'm Florent. I'm working for Grunenthal currently, where I'm head of commercial excellence. Before that, I was in big pharma. Now I'm in middle pharma with AstraZeneca, 12 years around the world, 4 years in Japan. And before that, we had a startup also in healthcare that we sold that time. And I'm really happy to be with you and share our experience going through this transformation.
Great, thank you, Florent. And finally, Dr. Mehra.
All right, bonjour, ça va? Hello, I know we have an international audience, as Anupam said here, and I feel so honored to be amongst these distinguished speakers. Hopefully I'll be able to provide a little bit of the clinical perspective here as a double board certified physician here in the US, and I've been in practice and have had my MD for over a decade now. So hopefully I can provide a little bit of perspective. I think this will be an amazing conversation, and thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you so much. So let's get into our first question. And the first question is, when it comes to the pharma to physician relationship prior to COVID, what was it like from your perspective? So taking it all the way back before the pandemic, let's start with Florent. Tell us a bit about how you saw things on the pharma side.
So it's been an evolving relationship, right? I mean, I recall arriving in, when was that, 2004, something like that, in the pharma world, and hearing stories about nice trips, great relationships, very, I would say, strange world relationship that has been cleaned, that has been, we've got some ethics and some compliance and governance that has been brought there. Now, in the 90s, in the 2000s, there has been also a phenomenon called the arm race or the share of voice race that were initiated by some pharma players, where the idea was, okay, you know what? If we repeat enough times something to the same physician, they will finally get it, right? So let's go with the same message, but with 20 people, and let's all say the same things. And let's hope that they will prescribe at the end. So from a communication standpoint, that was a nonsense, but that created an adverse reaction, and which is completely legitimate. So the hospitals started to shut down the access. The physicians didn't want to see sales reps that were, just delivering useless messages. HCPs had also more administration and more things to do in their daily life as well. We saw the population of HCP change also, and they were getting younger. They wanted to have a better work-life balance and these type of things. So at the end of the day, it was really complicated to get access. The content was not of high quality. So when the access was made, the interaction was not so good. So I think that the whole thing kind of was going straight into the wall, with efforts made here and there to improve the relationship and to deliver better value to the physicians. But overall, I would say the situation was not great. And I was the last one to expect that a worldwide pandemic could improve it. But we'll come to that point after.
Thank you, Florent. And moving on to the physician perspective, can you tell us how you saw it, Dr. Mara?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely echo that sentiment of, from a physician standpoint, that inefficiency. And so while I can appreciate the marketing strategy or the pharmaceutical strategy, I can tell you from a physician standpoint, it was frustrating. The heart of what I do is to optimize patient care, to optimize patient outcomes, and to ensure that at the end of the day, I have that human connection with them. And that's why we do what we do. And so while I love my pharmaceutical reps, and they're so integral to providing educational materials, allowing us to be able to prescribe things in the most effective and efficient manner, I wish it was more streamlined. And so I can definitely echo that sentiment, that even though in medicine we're one of the most advanced industries out there, at least when it comes to clinical practice. When it comes to our mode of communication with pharmaceutical reps, it's a love-hate relationship. I love it because it's essential, and I love my representatives, my medical device representatives, but we have been enable, both on the clinical side as well as the pharma side, to adapt to this technological revolution. I mean, there's a reason I still have a Rolodex of actual business cards with 20, 30 different pharmaceutical reps, medical device reps. I still have their cards on my desk, and I can't think of any other industry, even if I order food or call a cab, everything else is streamlined and really done through my phone. So I do agree that it has been a beautiful thing that COVID, the pandemic, has maybe fast-tracked some of the changes that may have taken over a decade.
Absolutely. And finally, Anhab, what are your thoughts?
Yep, absolutely. So I echo all the points made by Dr. Mara and Florent, right? So I don't think any of us are breaking the news, but let me so what has that led us to, right? By 2017, 1 out of 2 physicians had kind of shut the door, right? So like one of the primary mode of engagement, at least till pre-COVID, was face-to-face meetings, and it was rightfully so. Pharma companies spend a lot of time, effort, resources into making sure the reps are able to get access to physician. But all that strain, everybody's trying to get attention from physician, right? So physician attention is the most important commodity, if you call it. And in trying to do so, we turned off that channel about half, and then come COVID, it got shut down. It's not that we didn't, as an industry, apply the digital tools. It's just there was so much, and there is, to an extent, still is, right? The magic hasn't happened in a year. We have made like tremendous progress, but we are still on. primary digital channel was email, and we know, like, in being in 3 decades into overly email society, means best case scenarios we get open rate 5%, 7%, because you are just waking up to an email box which is flooded, right? So all these digital investments which went into was going into this specific unique channels, but it wasn't all coming together. And as physicians started getting strained, and obviously the patient load hasn't gone down, that just has gone up, and trying, like, also one of the key things which has changed over the last decade and a half is there are a lot of new drugs getting launched, right? There is a more attention, there are more reps out there, more companies out there trying to get into this physician offices. There is a economical change, like a lot of larger hospital systems are starting to buy physician practices, and they are directing what happens in a physician's office. So they are not as interested, as Dr. Mehra said, right? It's a love-hate relationship. Yes, I do want that relationship, but it's not going to come at cost of my own patients or my own business or my time. So all these challenges were evolving, and it came to surface. But the good news is, I think everybody took stock of what was happening, and over the last 12 months, I think we have seen some tremendous changes. And as we go down this conversation, we'll see some specific things, how change is happening, and what does it going to look like, right? So that's the state of pharma, if I would call it. It's not because of lack of investment or willingness to do it. It's just how complicated the whole infrastructure is and fragmentation of the systems deployed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anupam. Now, before we move on to our second question to the panel, I would like to remind all the audience, please do send in some questions, and I'll also be opening up a poll because we want to hear from you. And the poll question we have is, have you experienced a reduction in HCP visits? Now, you'll have 3 options, yes, no, or if it doesn't apply, then just please select that. But this poll will be open throughout our next discussion, so please cast your votes, and we look forward to hearing from you. Great, and so now let's move on to our second question. And the second question we have today is, how has COVID-19 changed pharma to physician? We've talked a bit about that, obviously the digital side, and so let's start with Dr. Mehra. I mean, is those in-person pharma reps visits still wanted by physicians?
To some degree, but there's had to be a swift adjustment, I think, and it's survival based, surely because if there was not that shift, the swift adjustment, then the communication, then the prescribing habits would also have deterred. So with the use of more telemedicine, I think this has forced the pharmaceutical doctor relationship, the medical device relationship with the physician to also advance. What I'm finding now is, yes, we are using more email and less fax, which is great. Yes, we're using more cell phone rather than, the drop-in method, which is also fantastic. So that has fast forwarded that. What now is frustrating is I still have 10 different modes of communicating with 10 different representatives or 10 different medical device representatives, which is difficult. So, I no longer have necessarily a medical assistant by my side all day that I can say, hey, medical assistant, could you please get, Pharma X on the phone? Instead, I have to then search through my mental Rolodex. Is it in my email? Is it a Zoom call? Is it a cell phone call? What are we doing? But if everything was sort of streamlined, standardized, if everything became, instead of all these variables, just like at the click of a button, I could use an app, I could use a button, I could use some kind of technology that made it consistent. That would take all these variables and, again, sort of the frustration out of the multiple variables and modes of communication. So I would say that there have been some very welcome changes because of the pandemic. And one of them has been that we've joined this technological revolution. It's now changing, like Mr. Florence said, that relationship, if you want to call it that, the paradigm with the physician. And instead of sometimes this ping pong effect and stopping in person, we're forced to now do this virtually. We're forced to do this communication using the technology that we have in front of us instead of antiquated methods of fax machines and dropping in. Even though some of these changes have been simple and effective, the question is, how do we now perfect it? How do we make it like the Uber, the Amazon? How do we join the rest of these industries that have been hyper successful in using technology to their advantage? And I think it's within our grasp, but we just have to use the doctors, we have to use the pharmaceutical representatives, the technology representatives. We have to come together for a streamlined, efficient solution.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Moran. And for you, Florent, can you give us your how it's changed?
Well, so I think it started by a panic attack, right? I mean, one morning my phone calls, that's my friend Aldo, general manager in Italy, and he tells me, we're going to go into lockdown in Italy. And I was like, what? A lockdown? That's for China. That's not happening in Europe. Never. And he was like, no, it's going to happen. It's going to happen in 2 weeks. So I won't be able to see any physician anymore. And then there's a gigantic, wow, okay, we need to go to switch technology on to do remote stuff. But do we have relevant content? Do we have the people trained? No. Do we have even the consent? Because, you can walk in a doctor practice and talk to a doctor to send an email. You need a consent. And then the whole chain started to, wow, we have a massive piece of work to do. And I think for me, now that we've gone through all that, the initial question, that was the first one, can we be relevant, is the most important one. What do they want to hear about? How do we make sure that the time they give us is valued, that we bring something that is interesting? And then once we get that, we will find a way, we will find the channel, we will find the technology that exists to give it to the doctors and to the HCPs around the world. So I'm really interested by that idea of, finding a platform and a technology where we can integrate all the experiences and everything. And that's maybe one way out to make sure we streamline the experience, we deliver good practice, and we deliver, to the physician the content that is useful for them.
Thank you. And for Anupam, how do you think pharma can really evolve based off COVID? Oh, just on mute, I think, Anupam. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So let's look where we are heading, right? There is no going back, like it's never going to be 100% face to face, right? That part, there are some physicians which are never going to let you just be that, right? So there's a population which has moved on. Florent mentioned there's a population of physicians which is coming to the society, workplace with some set of technologies which they have worked with in their college days and their residency and fellowship. So they don't expect from that mode to go into something, okay, now I have to open an email or open a website. They expect seamless transition into workplace. And one of the things is, right, the new world is video platform, remote engagement, and the technology is here, but also there is a lot of promise on the horizon, right? There is a lot of, so these things will become seamless. Kindergarten kids did 1 year of schooling remotely and they were able to learn, right? So the promise is there, and so does apply to all the workplaces. And ever increasing demand of physician time. So the way you are going to get physician time is creating that personalized experience, and personalized experience at scale. Dr. Mehra said, I need something, then I need something now. One of the things we as a company, we sensed this quite long ago and started investing into building the technology to support it. For example, if a patient's in Dr. Mehra's office and she needs to find out like a simple information, pharmacy code, if it's going to get approved. Like we build this whole text messaging platform where physicians and pharma company sales reps can communicate with each other with a simple text messaging. It sounds very simple. And Dr. Mehra said, right, Amazon, Uber, if I get my car at my door, I know, get a text message saying your car's here. The reason it wasn't happening or isn't happening at large scale is because there is a lot of compliance, there is a regulatory guidelines, there are things which you are allowed to do not. So we were investing in this prior to COVID, and it happened to be the same place. So we are able to do this, and we are working with several large companies to do that, right? So make that frictionless engagement. You are not asking doctor to log into a website, log into a portal. You are getting what you need. And it's not always the doctor, right? These offices have office staff, nurse practitioners, all those people, they have their needs too. If my only channel of engagement is through doctor, you are creating a bottleneck of engagement. The people are not getting what they need, and you are not getting the engagement you need. So we have opened up those things, and we are seeing a huge success there. We introduce like this remote engagement, what we call our product line is called Sweetens. These are like, let's call them easy button, but these are workflow buttons where you can press a button. None of the physician has ever, like, we have done multiple studies, and they all want the engagement. If they want at their own pace, at their own time, and they want to initiate it. So what did we do historically is everything has been pushed towards doctors, right? The flow of information has been pretty one directional, right? So we are giving physicians an opportunity with these buttons being deployed in physician offices. They can request a rep, they can request samples, they can request an MSL visit, and pressing a button and they are done. So the technology is here, right? So Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, we are creating a lot of inbound chatbots where automated. The point I'm trying to make is the solutions are there. How to apply in the business context is what's driving this transformation. And it has been a tremendous success in terms of seeing what companies can do and the changes which are. We are moving towards, like, if you look at the channels which physicians get engaged, there are emails, there are print journals, there are web ads, TV ads, like the whole circle is so big. And we go from uni-channel to multi-channel. Now we are going in omni-channel, but at the same time, it's a multi-experience. Just because you are in your car, you should have not have different experience because you are in office, because you are in home. So combining that omni-channel experience with multi-experience is what will create, it will bring physicians, okay, I can deal with this pharma company because I can spend 20 minutes and get what I need, or I can get 2 minutes what I need, and it's going to be in the reference of what I need to do. So there's a lot of promise on the horizon with these things.
Excellent. Thank you, Anupam. So I'll now end our poll. Thank you, everyone who shared their votes. Also, I'd like to encourage everyone. We've already had some questions come in, so please don't be shy. Feel free to send in any questions you have for the panel, and we will be answering those after our last question. Also, just a reminder that we do have the Twitter stream going on, #PP Webinar. Please get involved. And also that this webinar will be available after today as an archived version. Great, so now let's move on to our final question, and probably the most important one as we look to the future, which is, how do you see the farmer to physician relationship changing over the next few years? Will it continue to change, or will things go back to how they were pre-COVID? So let's start with Anupam.
Yes. So one of the things which is changing, right? Like human and digital, if you call it digital twin or digital experience, it's going to be intertwined as we go through. The technology will evolve, but trying to let technology drive your build of how you engage is actually not a right way. I think what we really need to do is build customer experience. Look what and customer is a relative term I'm trying to use in this case. It could be an HCP staff member, nurse practitioner, whoever that is. How do we deliver that experience and let the technology support it, instead of saying, I have this technology, let's see if I can fit this journey into this. So building that map, it's absolutely essential that we have in a journey, right? We can't forget on one channel that I had engaged so-and-so HCP on other channel and lose that context. To me, we can't afford that anymore, because in grand scheme of things, that drives all your journey, all your experiences. and how you deliver the information. Also look at, we as a society, our attention span, reading span, everything is shrinking. So we need bite-sized content, we need modularized content, we need instant information. So the investment's gonna go into how do we create that and how do we deliver it. So going back to my original point, like I was giving an example of text messaging, but there are a variety of ways we can do this. We can deliver that in a smaller pieces. We can give them in the right reference. And this, like physicians actually tend to give more time in digital engagement than they would give you on face-to-face, because it's that happening at their pace, their time, their choice of topic. And it's conversation which is happening across every boardroom, and there is a lot happening. So very, very excited. And one thing we should not forget, the promise of AI. AI is doing a lot of this hard work behind the scenes, and what we see is the front end of the experience and the user journey, but AI can support a lot of this heavy lifting behind the scenes.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Mara, can you describe how you see things changing?
I think it's amazing that we've discussed that life may never be the same. We may never go back to that normal pre-pandemic. And I think in a lot of ways, that's a great thing. Like Anupam was just saying, why should we go back to the way we were doing things if we now have found a better way to do something? So maybe our new normal will be more technologically advanced, even more human. Like he just said, we get more time with our patients, more time with our pharmaceutical reps, and we've just streamlined that. Florent also just mentioned, I made a note here, I wrote technological integration. And that right there, I think, is the key and the heart of where medicine is going and where we have come, both because of the nature of the pandemic, but also where we were headed anyway. No longer is medicine just going to be driving 30 minutes to see your physician and then waiting 10 minutes to get checked in, then waiting 20 minutes for the doctor. We've streamlined that now. I mean, with telemedicine, think about the access to patient care that we've been able to accomplish. Patients that may be older, immobilized, may have other restrictions, may not have rides, et cetera. Because of all those limitations, technology has helped us make this more human. We are now bringing it to your home. Because of that, now we examine the doctor pharmaceutical or doctor medical device relationship. And even that will become, I think, more human. There's always a hesitation, I think, as a society, especially in medicine, as physicians, as representatives, you think, well, we don't want to become too robotic. And so I think that paradigm shift has been very slow to happen because of this fear that, the robots will be able to do our job, or, it won't be as good. The reality here is there's that sweet spot. I think there's that sweet spot of integration between making it more human, but also using technology to our advantage, to let it flourish, let it grow, to make all of us more efficient in our day. Isn't that what we all want? So at the end of the day, I think the technological integration will be key, finding that sweet spot between the clinician's time, optimizing patient care, and ultimately providing the best patient care. I have to let you in on a little secret that I discussed with my colleagues, but we don't really admit outright. Maybe this will be the first time a doctor is admitting that. But if I have two products, if I have product X and product Y, and they both work identical, and they have the same, very close to the same patient outcomes, and I have a patient that comes in, Mrs. Jones, which product will I be more likely to use? It's going to be the one that I can get the most efficiently, that I can get the educational materials most efficiently from, the one that the representative is the most receptive. Therefore, I'm more likely to use that product or implant that medical device, because I know that then the patient will be in the best care. If that patient has an issue in the middle of the night, or whatever time of day, can they then communicate with that representative or that medical device representative, or can I communicate with them in an efficient way? And that's, again, assuming the two products are the same. So imagine when you talk to pharma and saying, if you want your product to be successful, it hinges on that communication with the physician, on your educational materials, on that paradigm that we now have to break. As Florent mentioned, in the dark ages, we talked about just kind of this be in person and be in their face, and hopefully they'll eventually want to use your product. It's the opposite. I want to know what gives me the best patient outcomes, what gives me the most human touch, the most human care possible. And I think that's something post-pandemic that we really just have to continue to optimize.
Absolutely. And Florent, how do you see it from the pharma perspective?
Well, I just completely agree with.
Oh, I think we've lost you on the sound, Florent. You there?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Sorry. No, I was just. I completely agree with what was said, and just to build on that, I think what the pandemic has taught us is this world is a digital world. I mean, internet is. Imagine where we would be if we had not had internet to go through the pandemic, if we had not had those remote, and I'm not talking specifically in healthcare, and but everywhere. And so that's one thing. And we are just starting to peeling the onion of the learning of that pandemic. For us as a pharma company, that means the technology race is a no-go. What has been successful in the world of internet are an economy made of platforms. Uber doesn't own any car. Airbnb doesn't own any apartment. Amazon doesn't own shops. They don't produce stuff. But those platforms bring people together and make them collaborate for the business benefits of both ends. And I think that's where us as pharma companies need to go, because we are not technological companies. We need to exploit these type of platforms. And what's going to make them the difference is going to be exactly to your point, the difference in terms of quality of service to what we should not be afraid to call a customer. Even if the customer is not using the product for himself or herself or whatever, and still should get the same quality of treatment, should get the same quality of care from the industry, so that we create good customer experiences, so that we can have relevancy in everything that we do. We come at the right time, through the right channel, with the right content, and not more. And then the thing is going to turn around. It's going to become a pull, a pull communication, where when something is needed, the pharma company is going to be called saying, can you give me information or help or support on this and that? And then we will provide it. And ultimately, that better customer experience will transform, exactly as you were saying, it will transform into sales, it will transform into business, it will transform into ethical, relevant, and successful business for both ends. And I do think that, virtuous circle is something we can create on the rooms of the old world, which was more, a marketing-driven, message-forced world. So I do have great hopes. Now, I hope also that the people who are leading the companies can also see that and are going to drive at high speed into that direction, so that the transformation, which will happen, doesn't take 20 years to happen. That's my plea.
Thank you, Florent. And I think it's important as well that we actually touch on compliance as well, and how that impacts the pharma to physician relationship. And if maybe you can tell us how you think the considerations are.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that's one of the very important point of how the evolution of technology happens, right? Because the industry, we are catering to the compliance and the regulations, and even from state to state, if you take here in the United States or just take nationally, there is a lot, right? So the default we have done historically, at least in the pharma world and the sales marketing promotion cycle, is we have constrained and limited it into the bucket. And the reason is we haven't been able to provide compliance departments enough visibility into some of the things. So how do we do this thing? So one of the key thing which we are doing across several of our customers is leveraging pieces of information which are already compliant approved. Make it easy for them. Okay, if there is a patient information brochure, it's been approved for using in an email. Can I deliver this to doctor in other channels, whether it's a website, text messaging or chatbot, because it's the same piece of content, but you are doing it. Also, like providing more visibility into the incoming data. Like one of the things which we do is we compile the information and make it seamless for compliance. Okay, I can scan through this in 10 minutes and I don't have to have two people just monitoring doing this. Using, like, we have built AI engines to do the content moderation, right? So when somebody's sending something, you can real time check what's good, what's not good. Nobody tries to break the compliance rules purposely, right? Like mistakes happen inadvertently. And how do we protect that? How do we put guidelines? At the same time, balance it out, right? Not doing anything is also not an option. So how do we make those two things work together? And I think we have spoken to several legal departments, OECs, compliance departments. There is a willingness to work, there is a willingness to share information, there's all that stuff, and it's like how we cater to that. So we are very excited about what's on the horizon and looking forward to how this can be evolved into providing uniform channel and content delivery, if you call it.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Mara, from your perspective, how do you see sort of compliance impact pharma to physician relationship?
I think, words like compliance, there's so much red tape, I guess is the right word, both here in America as well as internationally, that prevents, well, first of all, these rules are in place and compliance and regulatory issues are in place to ultimately protect, hopefully, the patient and the patient experience, and again, to optimize their care. And while I respect that, and I think it has a vital role, I think it often impedes our progress, and it impedes the progress being made because, like Anupam just said, many arms are not able to communicate with each other. And so we end up becoming very redundant in what we do. I have to collect patient information, and the pharmacy has to collect it, then an EMR has to collect it, then if I refer you somewhere, they have to, it's this redundancy. And even the patients get exhausted. Even with our technology, they get exhausted because so many systems don't communicate with each other. And as Florent just said, if we had these basically venues or platforms where everything could be siloed into one and everything could communicate. Imagine, even from a patient standpoint, the simplicity of being able to check in once, your name, your date of birth, insurance, allergies, everything is just listed. You don't have to review this over and over and over. And also it provides safer, more efficient patient care. And if just for a second to back up, if we talk about the variables again, right? What are all the variables in medicine? So we take a step back and we look at myself, I'm a private practice physician. On the other end of the arm is half of my colleagues are academic medicine. Now, academic medicine and private practice have their own different, again, paradigms and different restrictions, compliance, regulation. Then on top of that, you look at the different specialties. And again, now you've faced a whole different set of compliance issues, regulatory issues. So there's so many variables here, but eventually we have to admit that because of things like the pandemic, a lot of the red tape just disappeared. I mean, it was a matter, like Florent said, of survival. We woke up one morning, the world was not the same as it was yesterday. And so we were forced to say, well, how do we survive? It's sink or swim. It's now or never. And so even a lot of the compliance issues, sort of everyone put their hands up and said, well, we have to get patients care. And so what was amazing to see is without a lot of that red tape, which again is in place for a reason, but without that, we were able to make progress we haven't been able to make in 10, 20 years. And so what I'm here to say is we have to work with, whether it's our lawmakers, pharmaceutical, physicians, clinical, we have to basically combine. It has to be a multimodality approach. And so we can all work together, all communicate together, and then again, do what we all do best, and that's optimize that patient care experience and patient care.
Absolutely. And any final thoughts to add to that, Florent?
Well, compliance is a license to operate, right? I mean, otherwise, it's a wild, wild west. And it starts by creating the right culture, making sure that the people think the right thing, that they are going to do something for the right reason. And then it's building their skills so that they do it the right way. And if you take care of those two things proactively, you take out 95% of the compliance problem. Because you can defend what you're doing, even if it was on the front page of the newspaper. That's a little bit the challenge we put to all our teams on a permanent basis. If what you're doing, you have to explain it to a doctor tomorrow, face-to-face, the eye in the eye, will that doctor understand the benefits for him, for her, and for the patients? If yes, that's probably something you should be looking at doing. If there is anything that hints at, well, maybe it would be uncomfortable, then just don't do it. You know, that's better safe than, burnt.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, final reminder now to our audience, please send in any other questions. Thank you for those who already have sent them in. We'll be moving on to our Q&A session soon. There is also the poll open, so please cast your votes on that, which is, have you experienced a reduction in pharma? And I'll be ending that shortly. So yeah, we'll get ready for the Q&A. Take a little look here and see. We've got some good questions coming in. And this is one actually here for Dr. Mera, which is, what does your ideal pharma to physician interaction look like?
Anupam hit the nail on the head when he said Dr. Mera wants her communication and she wants it now. Or I think, as a doctor, we get this bad kind of persona that, we're just, we just want things and we want it now, but that's the truth. If I can be honest, I want it and I want it now. And the reason is, it's not really just that I'm impatient or that physicians are impatient. It's that, again, where I want to maximize my time and optimize my time is with that patient relationship. And as much as I love my pharmaceutical reps, if I want to meet with you outside for a drink, that's what I'll do. I don't want to foster that relationship during my clinic hours, during my procedure time. And so my ideal relationship doesn't look like when I'm in a procedure, I'm getting paged out saying, oh, the medical device representative just showed up, even though you had an issue in the OR 35 minutes ago. When I want it, I need it now. And sometimes it is a matter of life and death, depending on the specialty. And sometimes it is just a matter of getting the patient the best care that they can receive. And so what my pharmaceutical representative interaction looks like is optimizing that, streamlining that, using the technology to help me foster that, but not take away from the patient care experience and not be an inconvenience to me and to my patients.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Mara. And now we have a question for Florent, which is, what is the biggest challenge you've had to overcome with HCP engagement?
Not the technology. We have, vendors and partners that can help us. It's really the culture and the mindset. It's changing 20, 30 years of habits, ways of seeing the world, understanding the relationship, and doing stuff. And you need suddenly to tell all that group of people, now, from now on, we're going to work the other way around. We are not going to start thinking, I have a beautiful product and I'm going to sell millions of boxes of that product. I start from, I've got millions of beautiful customers and some of them may need to use my product for the right patient. So how do I articulate everything that I do to deliver that impact? And that's a massive cultural change. That requires time, attention, listening, psychological safety, and a lot of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Rob. And we've got another one now actually for Dr. Mara, which is, if there was to be one thing that you would say pharma could do to communicate or provide information to you better, what would that be?
Thank you. That's a good question. And I think Florent just hit the nail on the head there. There's a Zen expression that says, chop wood, carry water, then go get enlightened, and then come back and still chop wood, carry water. And so the first time I read this expression, I thought, how foolish. Why would I go out and get enlightened and then come back and do the same task? So what Florent just said was so powerful, because what he just said is, we're still doing the same thing. We're still providing our patients with a product, with a device, with a solution, with a therapy. But now our perspective, now the way we've become enlightened is totally different in how we're presenting it, in how we're communicating. We're still providing patients with these solutions, but now we've become enlightened about it, meaning our perspective has now shifted. So I hope that answers the question. It's sort of a philosophical answer, but it's exactly what Florent just said.
Thank you. Great, thank you. And actually one here now for Anupam, which is, what is the biggest challenge you face when implementing technology?
I think this particular question is across the board for every company. I don't think it's any specific to pharma companies more than other, but the challenge are same, right? Like you always start the question with, this is how we have always done it. So we got to get past that pose and then get everybody. But one of the key things which sometimes what happens is we over orchestrate it. What I mean by is we try to build this entire thing at one shot and not get those incremental wins. What we have found the most success is if you can fail fast, and there are so many different use cases and scenarios, you can make those course corrections. So like to me that has been the big and I think most of the companies now have what you call the titles are different, but some sort of digital office, if you call it, the intersection between the business, the IT, and just the innovation, if you think about it. And that has helped quite a bit. But also there is a lot of legacy burden. So when you say challenges, it's not necessarily the technology challenge, but there are systems which are so critical to day-to-day operations. Disrupting them takes a lot of planning, orchestration, changes across multiple areas. And some companies have like such a wide variety of product line, you do one thing for one and might disrupt the entire business line for other group. So you have to be very, very careful. So those things kind of like, it's not the willingness to not try or not change or not do it, it's just the planning and the whole execution. So that those are the primary barriers to getting started. Like I would say, once you get started, changes come very like more frequently and easily, if you call it.
Great, thank you. And another question now for Florent, which is, how has sales changed for your organization?
How the sales changed? Well, the act of selling has changed, definitely. I mean, that's, from going and repeating marketing message to understanding patient cases and trying to help the physician make the best use of the product. That has been a massive change. Now, in going through the transformation, I think we have not right now, measured the impact in terms of sales and all that, because we are really focused on the customer and on the customer experience. And we know, and it's not me inventing it, it's beautiful McKinsey, they got a whole study on that. We know that if we have a happy customer, guess what? You get better sales. That's just, and it's logical. I mean, if you know how to use a product, if it's a mobile phone, if you know how to use a mobile phone to call your family, well, you are more likely to buy another mobile phone from the same vendor than a mobile phone that you can't use and that falls apart when you're using it. And it's the same thing. If you have a product, and maybe I'm not the best place to comment on that, but if you have a product that you know how to use, when to use, for which patient to use, what side effects you can expect, what signs of improvements you can see on the patient behavior and symptoms early enough, and that there is something helping the patient as well, you're more likely to use it because you know what you're doing. And probably as a doctor, one of the most important things is do things while you know what you're doing, not experiment on people else.
Right, no, absolutely. And another one here actually for Dr. Mehra, which is, are you open to new technologies from pharma reps?
Absolutely. To not be open to new technologies, new solutions, new therapies, I think, again, is to put your patients at a severe disadvantage. We have to take advantage of the new technologies, new therapies, new modes of communication. And absolutely, while taking advantage of something new, there's always some fear factor in the back of a doctor's mind that, I'm not comfortable with this technology. I'm not comfortable with this therapy. I'm not comfortable with this device. This is new. And so while the promise and the hope of being able to advance medical care is there, you have to balance that and mitigate that with that comfort level. And so the more education we get, whether it be through webinars or conferences or talking to our pharmaceutical representatives, the more comfortable we get, the more likely, absolutely like Florent just said, is we are more likely to use that product because we feel comfortable. We look at the data, we review the numbers. We don't feel like our patients are the guinea pigs. It feels like I'm now providing them with another source of another tool in their tool belt. That, listen, you have disease X, you have condition Y. I am now giving you another tool in your tool belt that may actually save your life or change your life, or at least provide you hope of living tomorrow just a little bit better. And so it comes back down to how comfortable am I as a physician? And so the more educational materials, the more data that I'm given, the more comfortable I can then feel and say, well, while I am using something new, which is great, I'm not using my patient as, patient A to experiment on. I have all this data, all this information that is being presented to me in an unbiased way. And this is being presented to me as a solution, not necessarily, a product. If I want a product, I buy makeup products. But at the end of the day, I want solutions for my patients. How can I get them to live happier, healthier lives?
If I can just build on that, the personal experience. We have launched in Japan a product for lung cancer. That product is super efficient in some types of patients, but required a rebiopsy of the lung. The rebiopsy of the lung can be a very painful procedure if it's not well done, and many physicians in Japan were totally uncomfortable doing it. So what we did is a partnership with the physicians and the oncologists to make sure that our own teams could go there and help them get more comfortable doing that through trainings, through videos, through examples, and things like that. And that at the end, it was a win-win-win game for everyone. Our product could get access to the market. The physicians were better in their act and their practice and helping their patients. And the patients were having definitely a more comfortable experience and possibility to access a drug that could be life-saving for them. So that's exactly the type of things we want to be doing.
That response brings me so much happiness, because I think so often part of the community, part of the breakdown here and advancements has been forgetting that the physician does play a small role here. We do play a small role in ultimately being able to provide this care, this treatment, this rebiopsy to a patient. And so the more I think that we can bridge, people like Florent, Anupam, we can bridge everyone and say, but don't forget about the little doctor here, because the more comfortable we are, the more training that we get, the more likely we are to use that. And so ultimately remember that it does involve this multimodality approach, and the doctor, the clinician, the clinical aspect cannot be forgotten, because if you forget that, then you can have the best product in the world, you can have the best treatment out there, but if you don't have the people out there to implement it, kind of those boots on the ground mentality, the people at the forefront, the frontline workers, then your product will be very difficult. You're fighting an uphill battle. So you might as well use us to your advantage and educate us and help us understand. So then again, we can optimize that patient care.
Great, thank you. And so we've just got a few more minutes now. I've still got a couple more questions. So last chance for any feedback or questions from the audience. But this one actually now I've got now here for Anupam, which is, what would you say are the limitations of today's technology?
Actually, I'm going to answer this question, River. We have more technology today available at our disposal, the application of that technology. So I think the big disconnect is we always hear this Silicon Valley giants, whether it's Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, Google, whoever you take it, they do bring incredible technology. I think what we don't have is that use case application to actual thing. And I will give an example. And I think it will sound a little redundant, but I want to give a use case in it, right? Text messaging is not new. Apple and Android made it so seamless, and Facebook brought in WhatsApp and everything. We are pretty much talking to anybody across the world at click, right? But converting any technology from consumerism to B2B is where we kind of like fall behind. Like how the reason we fall behind, and specifically in pharma, right? There are so many wide variety of use cases. What we need to do is that take that technology and saying, I'm solving this problem. We started this conversation with physician engagement problem. So that's a problem. How, if I can apply text messaging to this, now I can go and say, do I have a problem with medical affairs with the physician engagement or patient and whatever, right? So we need to take these use cases, apply them. Dr. Mehra used a keyword, that training, right? So the training, we are all always learning in different contexts and pushing the information. The idea is to get them as much information so they can make better care decision for their patient. That's the ultimate bottom line, right? You are trying to get a better care decision for the patient and getting that information. So overall, the buckets of technology are very well defined for the next few years, at least, between AI, IoT, the blockchain. So the promises and the people who are writing this technology, I think they're certainly a lot ahead of us applying that technology to the use cases. So I think we are on a great track. It's going to be a lot of change over the next several years, but yep.
Great, excellent. And we do have one final question. I think we've got time for it, which has come through, and it says, in times of COVID, with all the restrictions on medical rep visits and with the tight schedules of HCPs not allowing enough time for virtual communication, how can we reach the doctors effectively, especially when the purpose of the communication is to remind the doctors of the product and see if we can support, and not necessarily delivering new information that they haven't seen? That one for you, Dr. Mara?
The mic just cut out at the end there, and so what was the
final question? So just to see what the best way to reach the doctors effectively, especially when the purpose of the communication is to remind them of the product and support them, and not necessarily giving them new information. So best, I guess, mode of communication.
Yeah, good question. I think the answer again is finding that sweet spot. And so the more comfortable that I will be communicating with someone, the more I know that it will be streamlined and efficient, and that if I can pick up my phone and text you rather than, again, having to fax or email or having to communicate with my nurse or my medical assistant, all these barriers to communication make it less likely that I'll reach out to you. And so the more we can make it efficient, we can make it reliable and standardized, I think even better. And so there's a trick here, right? There's a trick where I'm saying things need to be standardized and we can communicate with everybody the same way. And yet we need to make it personalized and human so that if there are problems and there are exceptions, I can still communicate with you. So we don't need everything to be just a drop-down menu and multiple choice, right? It's not that robotic. It's not that perfect. Humans are dynamic and we have ongoing dynamic situations. And so similarly, my communication has to be in one way very personalized and in another way still very standardized, so that I don't have to make another decision to say to communicate with pharma X versus pharma Y. I now have to communicate two different ways. It would be amazing if it was all kind of somehow just in one device or one app or one method where I could communicate the same way with everybody.
Right, excellent. Right, so we'll have to wrap up soon, but were there any final thoughts you wanted to share at all with the audience, or any kind of key takeaway messages?
I want to thank everybody for a great conversation. Thank you, Dr. Mara, Dr. Florent. Excellent conversation. And these are good times, right? So we have challenges, but then we also have solution, its application. So the technology curve is changing. Engagements are changing. So let's continue this innovation cycle.
Absolutely. And thank you all to the panel. I know that it's been much appreciated. We've had some great feedback coming in through the question box. So thank you all so much for your insights. And to our audience, just before you go, we want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. It's been a great discussion and we've really covered the journey here. And obviously, as Anupam said, it's exciting times with innovation. So if you would like any more information, please visit www.p360.com. You can also follow them on LinkedIn. And this webinar will be available on demand shortly after today's stream. So feel free to share with your colleagues or anyone that you think may be interested. And thank you again so much to all the panel. Thank you for joining us today.
Excellent.